grade 5s. So we've been speaking a lot about different materials. We spoke about metals and non-metals, and then we discussed all the properties of both of those, and we looked at different uses of metals. And today we're starting a new chapter about processing materials, and that means basically changing materials. Processing means to change something in any kind of way to make something new. So in the textbook, they talk a lot about combining, which means putting two or more things together. And the first thing they mention is mixing and setting. So if you think about cement, for example, it's a powder, which is a solid, and then they mix it with water, which is a liquid, and then it makes something new, and it's like a sloppy thing, and you can use it in between bricks, or you can pour it into a mold or whatever, and then you leave it to set, which means we leave it for a while and it becomes hard. It dries and it becomes hard. So that's mixing and setting. Making a paste is when you take a powdery substance and you mix it with a little bit of liquid and it makes it paste, something that feels almost like toothpaste. So if you think about, or if you look in your textbook, in one of the next lessons, you are going to make your own glue by mixing flour with water. So when you do that, it will make a paste. If you put too much water in, it will be all runny and watery and won't be right. So you have to use a lot of powder and only a little bit of liquid. Then we get a paste. Mixing and cooking, that's basically anything you can do in the kitchen. You can think of cooking in different ways, like frying or baking, and then also if you like not just food but also baking something like a cake in the oven. So there's a lot of processes actually involved in cooking, a lot of ways that we change each ingredient before we combine it and add it all together. So you might chop something up, or you might mix something, beat an egg, whisk something, cool something down or heat something up, and then mix it all together. Throw it in the oven. There's many different processes, and we'll get to that when you do your project at the end of the week. And then we have mixing and cooling. If you think about jelly, for example, it's also a powder and a liquid that we mix, and then it's this runny business, but when we leave it to cool in the fridge, then it becomes jelly, it sets, okay? And that's because we mixed it and then we cooled it. Mixing, drying, and firing. Now, the textbook refers specifically to bricks. If you look in the textbook, there's a whole section on how bricks are made, and that's also made by mixing different things together and then drying it either in the sun or firing it, so putting it in like a very warm oven to bake it, and then it also becomes hard, just like cement. Okay, there's many different other processes that we can use to process materials. Here at the bottom are just a few that I thought of, but you can think of many more, I'm sure. If we think of cutting, if you cut anything up into smaller pieces or cut it into a shape, you've changed that material into something new, which means that cutting is a process that we can put a material through. Coloring and flavoring. If you take a fabric, for example, which is already a processed material because we've used cotton or wool or whatever to make that fabric, we can dye that fabric by putting it in some dye, and you make your nice white pair of pants pink or blue or green, whatever you want. Coloring. And then flavoring. If you think of food, you can flavor many different things in many different flavors, and that's also a way of changing it, so we are processing it. Melting is another one. If you think of chocolate, for example, again, it's already a processed material because we took cocoa and sugar and milk and a bunch of other ingredients and we mixed it and we made it into chocolate. But if I take chocolate and I melt it and I make a chocolate sauce, then it's also a completely new product, and I've used melting as one of my processes. Covering. If I take wood and I paint it with a varnish so that it won't damage in the sun, I have covered it. Or if I take copper wires and I put plastic around to make an insulation, then I have covered the copper with plastic. So I've used two different materials and I've covered the one with the other. That's also a way of processing it. Fermenting. If you think about cheese, cheese is basically milk that's been fermented. Wine is grapes that's been fermented. So it's left for a long time and then it ferments and it becomes something completely new. That's another process. Shaping and molding. If we think about clay as a material, a non-metal, we learned earlier, you can shape it and mold it into any kind of thing you want to make. And weaving is the last one I put on. If we take reeds, for example, and we weave it nicely into a basket, we've taken one material, processed it to make something completely new. Okay guys, that's processing materials. I hope you enjoy this week's lessons and especially the project for this week. I'm excited about that. Have a great week guys. Bye.